Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear okay? How is the audio?
I can hear you.
Perfect. Thanks, Greg. All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. We are so glad that you could join us today for this webinar. My name is Laura Mukherjee, and I'm going to be the moderator of the webinar. Before we begin, just a couple of quick notes. We are going to be recording today's session, and there are going to be time for questions at the end. And if you do have any questions as we're going along, feel free to just use the raise your hand button or drop them into the chat, and we'll make sure that Grayson sees those. Today's session is going to be hands-on. We're going to be exploring how to engage students in problem solving, critical thinking, and creative reasoning in elementary math. You're going to get to see strategies for going deeper into math topics and even try out some puzzles. This approach has been shown to improve performance, boost confidence, and help students get truly excited about math. So I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker, Grayson Maas. Grayson joined the Art of Problem Solving in 2015. He earned his PhD in Sociocultural Anthropology from the University of California, Santa Barbara, where his research focused on the factors that contributed or that contribute to underrepresentation in STEM education and the workforce. For the past decade, he has been working with the art of problem solving to bring rigorous and engaging math education to students of all backgrounds. And we're so excited to welcome here today. So, with that, Grayson, I'm going to turn things over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. I might sound a little funny because I'm dealing with some allergies, but I'm going to push through. So I'm so excited to tell everyone here about Beast Academy. So we will do some puzzles. Don't worry, I'm not going to like unleash the super difficult problems on everyone unless you're ready and willing to do that, then we will go there. But really what I want to do is talk to you about kind of our approach to math education. And at the broadest level, it's really about moving away from what is, standard, like a more traditional or standard approach, which is very rote, algorithmic, procedural. That approach is fine in a vacuum. It's very good at teaching students how to identify a certain problem and then get a correct answer. But what it's lacking is in its ability to really get at conceptual understanding. Or, for instance, even giving students the ability to build skills so that they could be faced with a novel problem that they've never seen before. And if they're only learning in a rote way, they won't be able to solve something they haven't seen because the student will say, I don't know how to solve that. No one's ever taught me. Instead, what we prefer to do is give students kind of like the underlying tools, the strategic thinking, the problem solving, the creative reasoning, so that they can be faced with novel problems and then confidently navigate them. So in order to do this, I am really going to dive. This isn't going to be like a sales pitch, but I am going to be showcasing our approach and our curriculum because I feel it does such a wonderful job at kind of like showcasing some of these broader themes that I really want to highlight. Um, but honestly, I'll even show you some like, a lot of free resources that we have at the end, just so that you can kind of like dip your toes into this, and get a feel for what, different looking math can really feel like in the classroom and really out of the classroom as well. So, Beast Academy, these cute little red buildings that you're seeing here, this is our elementary math program. It's a bit of a misnomer, actually, to call it elementary math because of the rigorous and advanced nature of it. It's actually good for students, I would say, like ages 6 to 13, and you'll see a little bit about why that's the case. So without any further anticipation, I'm actually just going to dive in. But first, I'm going to do like a little bit of table setting. This program is going to cover what we call levels 1 through 5. It's a little bit better not to think of this as like grade levels, even though these do roughly correspond to grade levels and the content that you might see in them. But think of it more as like levels of learning, right? So every one of these levels is going to have 12 chapters that has a different kind of topical focus. So I'm going to go right in the middle of this thing and go to multiplication because this is something that is eminently familiar to everyone. Either you've taught it, or you have a colleague who's taught it, or you remember learning multiplication when you were a student. So I want to kind of show you the progression of how we would get to how we would use puzzles really to kind of unlock some of this deeper creative strategic thinking that ultimately we believe serves students so well. So have to have our foundations. So when we're introducing the concept of multiplication to students at the very beginning, we might pose that as a repeated addition problem, right? So like 5 times 8 is really the same thing as 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8. Okay, easy peasy, right? And then something everyone's going to find familiar, a times table, right? You've got numbers down the bottom in order, numbers across the top in order, and these are going to be just like some simple computational problems. So that's one key that I want to get to is that if in order to get to the higher level things where you're kind of using puzzles, you're using deductive reasoning, you're using logic, students need to have a pretty strong foundation in the core computational task itself, in this case, multiplying single digit numbers together. Okay, so they can do this. Then we would flip the script ever so slightly on them and give them something called a twisted times table. So this is where you're going to see a slightly different approach. And what you'll notice is that, so in order to answer this problem correctly, essentially what we're doing here is we're going to fill out the all of the gray boxes up top and all of the gray boxes along the left-hand side. Now, most of the time, in fact, maybe every time, when students see a times table, they're going to see it presented in the exact same way, right? Numbers that are ascending, numbers that are ascending, just on the other axis. But here, in order to answer this problem correctly, we're going to have these numbers all jumbled up. And basically, what we're looking for to understand what numbers we put on the left and the top are going to be the clues that we find within the middle of the puzzle. And these are really the only clues that we need in order to solve this. So, I don't know if everyone's muted or not, but I would love to just hear from a couple people like where this blinking cursor is. Like, what should that number be? I can't tell if it. Okay, someone go for it.
V5,
V5? Okay. So tell me why you know that for certain.
uh, where it intersects with the other five is 25.
Yep, exactly.
5 times 5 is 25.
Exactly. So we're looking at this 25 in here, right? So important. So that might look all us adults in the room who might be able to do something like that very quickly. But think about giving this to a third grader that has, they've demonstrated that they can multiply single digit numbers effectively. But we're not asking them just to compute anymore. Now we're asking them to think, right? And without, calling this a lesson in logic or deductive reasoning, that's exactly what's going on here, right? In other words, what one of your colleagues just said, that box has to be 5. It must be 5 because we already have a 5 on the left-hand side and we see a 25 over here. So we're kind of like working backwards. What about this one right below this 5? Any grave souls?
3 or 9.
Okay, right. Exactly. 3 or 9. And so you're almost getting into a little bit of it almost starts to feel a little bit like Sudoku in a sense, right? But so what we're doing is we're taking something that is eminently familiar, like the concept of multiplication, but we're just dressing it up a bit so that we can understand some strategic thinking and some problem solving. Now, this would be a very light example, so we don't need to belabor this too much more, but you kind of get the idea. And now I want to show you what happens when we push that even further. And so this is a multiplication lesson, but as you'll very quickly see, there's so much more than multiplication that's going into this. And this is one of my favorite lessons in the entire program. It's called Block Mountains, and these are a series of puzzles. Now, anytime you hop into one of these lessons, you're going to get these little instructions on the right-hand side, giving students the opportunity to kind of like just play around with things without it impacting their data or their progress or anything like that. So the concept here is that the block that sits on top of 2 blocks is the product of those 2 numbers. In other words, 4 times 6 is 24. just by way of example, to do another easy one, that would be 10. This would be 2, and that would be 20. Okay. So what I want everyone to pay attention in this lesson are pay attention to are the first 3 problems. So this couldn't be easier, right? This is just straightforward computation. This is intentional, right? If you want to build students up to these higher order levels of thinking, even if you believe that they're capable, it's not always the best thing just to throw them into the deep end right away. It's really good to scaffold that experience and kind of stair step your way to it. So in the spirit of that, you'll look at these first 3 problems. And structurally, they're very similar, right? Like, yes, the block mountains are growing. Yes, you are ultimately going to be multiplying larger numbers together. Like if you just were to look at this one, you've got 5, you've got 100. All right, now we're going to be multiplying a 2-digit number by a 3-digit number. Okay, so that's a little more complicated than that problem. But still, at this point, nothing really earth-shattering. And then we're going to turn the dial just a little bit to get to problem 4. Now, when you first look at this, you might think, okay, well, maybe that's not necessarily challenging, but put yourself into the mind of the 3rd grader that would be encountering this, and knowing what they know after having read the instructions and what they saw in those first 3 problems, and knowing that this is a multiplication lesson, what we imagine that student is going to think when they first see this is, hold on a second. I thought I was supposed to multiply the bottom row because I know how to multiply and then just put that number up top. That's good. That's by design. We want them to have that moment of doubt because ultimately it opens the door for productive struggle and growth. And then we imagine that even if it's just a split second later, that same student is going to think, well, hold on a second. I already have the top number, so I guess it's asking me 8 times what gets me there. Now, the reason that's so important and effective is because this is a very subtle way of teaching students by way of their experiencing it instead of someone telling them this, that multiplication and division are 2 sides of the same coin. In other words, that learning becomes sticky because it becomes their learning. Another way that maybe traditionally is given to students is like, okay, well, here's what multiplication is. You'll know it when you see it. Compute, get your answer, move on. Different from that, you have a division problem. Divide, get your answer, move on. And a different way of thinking about that is it's really the inverse, but that's not their knowledge. That's something that's being told to them. When you structure a problem like this, in other words, a puzzle that doesn't have any computational symbols, now students kind of like almost more intuitively understand how numbers play with each other. So this is really like a turning point, which allows for far deeper levels of learning and even greater challenge. So we can take a look at problems that look like this, like this, like this, and like this. So this is a really good problem, right? This to me is a great problem because number one, we're building up to it. 2, while we're still using multiplication, multiplication alone will not help you solve this problem correctly. There's no running and hiding from a problem like this. You have to critically engage. You have to think about what you're doing and think about how all the puzzle pieces and the numbers really fit together. So we might know where to start, right? 30 times something gets us 6,000. We know it's 200. But most importantly, we don't know. It's not immediately obvious as to what we should do next. In other words, this is not a standard looking problem that has a routine path to solution where you're just relying on process and rote skills. So in the spirit of that, let's try and collectively solve this. So what I want someone to do, whoever decides to speak up here, what I want you to tell me is what number you want to put into a box and why you started there and why you think that's a good place to go. Or for anyone looking at this, and let's say you found a path where this couldn't work, tell me what you did and why you're like, oh, well, that couldn't possibly work.
I'm thinking a 6 on the far right.
6 over here?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me why.
Well, I was just thinking about all the factors of 30, 15 times 2, 10 times 3, 6 times 5. And a 10 would not make any sense to put there because 6 times anything would not be 10. A 3 would not make any sense unless we are, multiplying by not our typical factors.
Yep.
So I was thinking a 6 here and then probably a 1 below.
Yep.
And then a 5. And I didn't get any further than that yet, but that's what my first thought initially was, just based on the factors of 30.
Okay, yes, absolutely. Very, very good. That's exactly, I mean, you're spot on, number one. But the most important thing that we just did is we had a conversation around modeling, right? Like you're telling me the strategic process that's going on in your mind. And how many people in the room have heard students say, oh, I just do it in my head, right? This is a program that's designed to really kind of compel students to intentionally kind of think about their strategy, think about their process, reflect on it, iterate, and then try something different. I'll show you a little bit more in just a couple minutes here as to how we get into that in a really deep way. But that's exactly right. Like you can think of this in terms of like, okay, well, we're factoring now. This number, you're multiplying this 6 by something that's going to give us a number. And whatever that number is, that has to go cleanly into 18. Well, it can't be 12, it can't be 18, and it can't be 24. So 6 is really where it's at. So now, if we have that piece of the puzzle, I think you did mention the 5. If we know that that has to be a 6, then that must be a 5. And now it kind of like carries us through the rest of this problem, right? So we know that that must be a 5. 5 times 1 is 5. 8 times 5 is 40. And it all checks out. Okay, great. Now, I mentioned before that there are levels of learning, right? And so we believe in that eminently, right? Like we believe that if students were if a classroom of students were accessing this lesson, we wouldn't necessarily, unless it was like a heterogeneous group of like high ability, high interest students. I'm sorry, a homogeneous group and not heterogeneous. Then maybe we would have an expectation that all of them could get to around this problem and get it correct. But if it is a heterogeneous group, the expectation shouldn't be that every student needs to get all the way through the lesson before they move on to the next thing. In fact, in a class, in a diverse class in terms of ability of maybe 20 students, we might expect that, the whole class can probably get up to this question correct. And then maybe 25% could get here. And then maybe a couple kids could get to that. And then that would be fine. And then you might have some very high interest students who are interested in a deeper challenge. So we have trophy problems for that. Now, a trophy problem for that lesson looks like this. So these are great problems because they lend themselves towards strategic dialogue. They lend themselves toward the types of questions that I was just posing to the group, for instance, right? Like, okay, you're faced with this problem at first. It looks daunting. It might even look impossible, especially to a young learner that hasn't built the confidence yet. But that's okay because we can fall back on the most important question, which is, well, first a realization, we don't know how to solve this just by looking at it. That would be impossible. But what do we know? Let's start there. What do we know for certain about this puzzle?
2 times 1 equals 2.
And on the other side, right? 5 times 1 equals 5. So again, going back to the rules of our puzzle, there's only one way to get to the 2, right? Because we're using integers. There's only one way to get to the 5. But the next question should be, well, how do I know where my 1 and my 5 go and where my 1 and my 2 go? That's another interesting question to get into the process that students might have. So does anyone want to, and we'll come back to this problem because it might take us a while we'll see if we have time at the end, we can come back and try and solve it as a group. But does anyone want to take a stab at whether they think the 5 should be on the outside or the inside, or the 2 should be on the outside or the inside, and why?
I think the inside.
Why should it be on the inside?
Because 80,000 is a pretty big number. And if I keep the 1 in the inside, like I'm not going to get to that larger product.
Yep. And that's a excellent hypothesis, right? And so these are the kinds of questions, that we like to ask students. These are the kinds of conversations that we like to have with students because it is It is the road that they can walk down that allows them to think bigger. It allows them to think deeper. It allows them to think about math as a subject that isn't black and white. It isn't right or wrong. Almost to start to think of math the way a mathematician might, right? For like the room for creativity and discovery, the room for nuance and gray area, that there might not even be just one way to solve or approach a problem. Like, yes, we know that the numbers are probably going to be what the numbers are, but there can be different starting points for where you might want to tackle this problem. And that lends itself to a really rich conversation that can help bring the classroom to life. So let me go back a second here. And I'm going to show you something that is a kind of hallmark of our approach, but it also really ties in very nicely to a lot of the themes that we've been discussing already. And it has to do with these two buttons up here. So this first button, so this is one of 1,000 lessons in here. Every single one of the lessons in Beast Academy has this little watch video button up there. So this is not only a really good standalone learning and teaching tool in and of itself, but it is also a really good resource for when a student might look at a problem like the one we just solved on the screen, and they're like, I'm stuck. I don't know where to go next. So let's just watch this video as a group. And I would love to have, the only primer going into this video, take note of some of the communication strategies and some of the teaching strategies that you'll hear. And I would love to have a quick discussion about that after the video wraps.
When we finish filling out this puzzle, each number is going to be the product of the two numbers just below it. Now let's start off at the top. This 12,000 is 200 times whatever goes in there. Well, I need to multiply 2 by 6 to get that 12. 200 times 6, that'll just have 2 zeros at the end. This thing has 3 zeros. I need another 0. So let's drop another 0 in there. 200 times 60, let's check. 2 times 6 is 12, and then I've got 1, 2, 3 zeros total at the ends of these two numbers. So we've got 1, 2, 3 zeros to tack on to the end of that 12. We get 12,000. That works great. This number has to be 60. All right, this 200 is this number times this number. I don't know what either one of those numbers is, so let's move on to this. 60 is this number times this number. I don't know any of these numbers, but I do know I need some zeros in here. I need to get 2 zeros in the end up here, and I can't have both of the zeros in there because then I'll end up with 2 zeros over there, and that's no good. So I'm going to need some zeros over here. Got to get some zeros there. I could get a 0 over here by just putting a 10 down there. 10 times 4 would give me 40. But if I have a 10 there, I'm going to get at least 10 there. I'll be multiplying this 10 by something. And 40 times something that's at least 10, that's going to get at least 400. That's too much because this is 200. If I put a 10 in there, I'm going to get something bigger than 200 up there. It's not going to work. Can't put a 10 in here. I really need a 0 in there. At least I think I do. How am I going to get a 0 in there if I can't put 10 in here or anything bigger than 10? Put anything bigger than 10 in there, I'm going to be way higher than 200 up there. How do I get a 0? I'm multiplying this 4 by something that's less than 10. Well, I could put a 0 in there. But that would make zeros go all through the table because then this would be 0 and this would have to be 0, and that's not what we want. We could put a 5 in there. We could put a 5 in here because 5 times 4 is 20. And there's a 0. And then 20, I need a 10. 20 times 10 gives me 200. And I get a 10 right there by putting a 2 right here. 2 times 5, that's 10. 20 times 10 is 200. That works. And then this 2 times 3, that gives us 6. And 6 times 10 equals 60. It works out perfect. We finished the puzzle.
Okay, so what did people pick up on in that?
Just kind of iterating or ideating, just thinking about, okay, just thinking out loud, which which numbers he could try out.
Exactly right. This is a theme that came up earlier when we were collectively solving our own block mountain puzzle. You see it reflected here again, and then I'm going to make this point one more time when I show you the next thing. But modeling, the importance of modeling. Modeling is what allows us to give students access to a deeper understanding of math because it is a nod toward strategy. It's a nod toward intentionality. Okay, if I do this, will this work? Yes or no? Well, what if I do this? Could that work? And you see him kind of talking about, he's putting voice to the strategy that's going on in his mind. Well, I couldn't possibly have a 10 down here because if I have a 10 here, I have to multiply it by something. And then I'm going to get at least a 10 there. And then that would give me 40. And then that's going to be more than 200, 40 times 10. So, what are some other things? That is like the like gold star number one thing that I think is done really well in this video. There are a couple other subtle yet effective things that I thought took place in the video as well. Any takers? All right. I'll tell you what I think it is. So this is a different way of thinking about and doing math. We believe that it's a superior way because it doesn't just teach students how to do well on math tests, even though it absolutely does that in spades. It's superior because it helps them become, just in general, better thinkers and better problem solvers when you're modeling, when you're thinking strategically, when you are kind of compelled to iterate and then change, but know why you're changing and something like this. So it's really understanding the meaning behind the calculations you're performing. Because that is more involved and it's more complex, it means it's more challenging. And getting students used to a more challenging version of what they've known math to be is not always the easiest journey. It doesn't mean it's not a journey worth taking. It just means it's not always the easiest journey. And in particular, some students who may have cultivated identities early on in mathematics because they're really good at it, but they're really good at the old guard. They're really good at computation. They're really good at doing everything in your head, being a fast finisher, getting everything right on the quiz. A student like that may be faced with a problem like this, and it might be intimidating, and they might get a little frustrated, and you kind of see a little bit of that when my colleague Richard turns back to the camera after he's all excited because he put the 60 in there and he's like, all right, the 200 is this block times this block, and he doesn't know. And then he moves over here and he's stuck again. And he, turns back to the camera with that slight frustrated look. Essentially, he's mirroring the emotional journey that a student might take. But importantly, if he's serving as like a mentor, or really any teacher that's kind of, introducing this kind of math and this kind of thinking to students, he doesn't give up though, right? So he's like, okay, well, I don't know exactly what numbers go in this row, but what do I know? Or at least what do I think I know? I think I need a 0 here. How am I going to get there? I don't need to know anything else. I just need to play with that first concept. And, bit by bit by bit, we get there. And the real benefit of this is that if you can overcome that, and some students might not be frustrated, but for some students that are, it's not a sign that they shouldn't be there. In fact, it might actually be a sign that they are the ones that absolutely should be there. The real intellectual joy that a student experiences after looking at a problem like that, throwing their hands up and being like, I don't know how to solve that. And it's like, hold on, let's stick with it. What if we start over here? And then, you do some like gentle guiding and facilitating. When that student ultimately gets that last piece of the puzzle there, the sense of accomplishment and pride is far greater than what they would ever experience in answering the question, multiply 63 times 47. It's like, who cares? A phone could do that. A phone can't answer that problem. And again, I apologize. My allergies are really, really bumping right now, but I'm gonna power through. The other thing I want to show everyone here is this little book button up here. So this is So the Beast Academy approach, this is Beast Academy Online. Beast Academy actually started as a book series. This is something that we started creating about 12 or so years ago. It took us 10 years to build, actually. So we put so much love, attention, and care into this because, and I hope it's coming through, we really, really care about this stuff and believe in it. So for those of you who have never seen what our version of textbooks look like, this is what they look like. So we have what are called guidebooks. So the guidebooks, we have 4 of them per each of these 5 levels. And for each of those 4 guidebooks, essentially what we've done is digitize them all, chop them up into like 5 or 6 page blocks, and then basically pasted each of those 5 or 6 pages across the 1,000 lessons, such that when you click that book button, it gives you like the recommended reading, if you will. Now, the first thing you should notice is that this doesn't look like a math textbook because it doesn't. This is a graphic novel concept, and we do this very intentionally, right? So, one reason is because clearly we're trying to do something different here. We're trying to deliver through the vehicle of mathematics the gift of problem solving. At the end of the day, if you ask any of my colleagues here, like, what is it that we're actually doing? Like, yes, in a very literal sense, we're doing math, right? But like the why behind it, the deeper part of that is that we're hoping to cultivate problem solvers. We're hoping to cultivate critical thinkers, which is it's never been more important than it is now. It's always been important, but the skill, if you were a problem solver and a critical thinker, there's always a place for you. There's always a career for you. But if you're just a rote, follow the steps, get the answer, it leaves a lot to be desired, right? So, um, we want to invite students to take this journey with us. And we figured, well, like what better way to get them excited and motivated and hungry to do this than to really reimagine what the elementary math textbook looks like. Not like a black and white cookbook with recipes that you follow, but instead something that's far more colorful, far more interesting, something that looks like this. And we know from experience that, it doesn't really matter how well designed, researched, or intentioned an approach is. If students aren't excited about doing it, it's as if you've never made it in the first place. So we feel that that's like half of the coin. The other half, and I promised earlier that this word would come up again, is because we get to model here, right? Like you can't do a lot of modeling and strategic like walkthroughs for different doors that you could go down or different ways to think about solving a problem. Sometimes you can, but most of the time it's really difficult to do that with a standard looking approach. And I referenced that analogy to like a cookbook or like a baking book. So let me like just paint that a little more clearly here. So in this approach where characters are talking to each other and they're talking to each other about problems that look like this. In other words, problems that lend themselves towards modeling and strategic conversations. Juxtapose that with the traditional looking math textbook, which is also, by the way, why the perception of what math is for a lot of young people is that it is rote, it is black and white, because that's the image that they've been given. Um, I liken that to a cookbook for the following reason. So if I've never baked a cake before, what would I do? Get a, Julia Child's baking book or something like that, flip to the chocolate cake section because that's what I'm feeling that day. And then it would tell me get this number of eggs, get this much flour, get this much sugar. Okay, got it. Check, check, check. All right, mix these ingredients together in these amounts. Done. Preheat the oven to this temp. Done. Step, 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 step. And at the end of that process, I get my cake. It's probably not the best looking cake in the world, but I'll get my cake, right? It's like getting my answer. Most importantly, I never had to think. I never had to think once. I'm just following the steps. We believe that historically, now this has changed some, right, with the advent of Common Core and everything like that, but it hasn't changed enough. And we believe that the traditional approach, especially in elementary math, because it's overly rote, and in some ways it needs to be because it needs to be foundational, but there's a lot more that can be done. And if it's only rote and it's only procedural, then essentially you're delivering an experience in math where students will know how to bake that cake if they've memorized the recipe, but they wouldn't know what would happen to that cake if you added 2 more eggs, or if you took out the flour, or if you added a bunch more sugar. So to push the analogy forward, it's almost like we're trying to teach students an approach where they're understanding what the ingredients are in a deeper level so that they understand how they play with each other, and then they can make their own delicious recipes just with math and numbers, of course. Okay. So I have a couple more minutes, and I wanted to show everyone here something that I think is really fun, really valuable, and it's going to allow us to do some group problem solving, and then I'll pause for questions at the end. So this is a really fun and becoming viral, I would say, resource. It's called All10. You can check out how to get there. You can see it right up here, beastacademy.com/all10. And this is a wonderful, wonderful warm-up exercise. And honestly, like, this doesn't just have to be for elementary students. Like, this could be middle school, this could even be high school. I still have fun doing this every day. Like, it could really be for anybody. So the concept is well, first, the way to think about this is it's like what if math geeks made their version of Wordle? This is what this is. So it's all 10 because you basically have to use these 4 numbers and then any computational symbols that you would like in order to get to these answers. So in other words, how can you use 2 2s, a 3, and a 4, and these symbols that equal 2, that equal 3, that equal 7, right? And then every day there's going to be a different set of numbers. You're still always going to have all 10 up here, and you're going to have a different set of computational. I'm sorry, you'll have the same computational symbols, but you'll have a different set of numbers. You can have streaks going. You can do all that kind of stuff. And like I said, it's just a fun game, honestly, that you can play whenever. But it's a really good warm-up activity as well. So let's take a stab. Anyone say like, oh, I know how to get to 3, or I know how to get to 6.
Well, I know how to get to 4.
All right,
That's two
do it.
times 2.
All right, let's do that. 2 times 2. All right, let's give us a 4. We have to use all 4 of these numbers. Well, now we only have 3. So here, I'll give you an example. So we have our 4. 4 divided by 4. And then let's do 1 plus 3. That gives us our 4. And then it gives the correct mathematical notation over here. So you don't have to put in the parentheses. You can make it easier on yourself by saying like, okay, what if we did, like, here's another one, right? This would be a very easy way to get to 5. 4 minus 3 equals 1. 1 plus 2 plus 2. There's our 5. Does anyone have any ideas for how to get to any of the others?
And could you do 2 divided by 2 to get the 1?
By 2, yep. All right, what next?
So that wasn't how you get to 1 then.
Right,
3
yep.
times 1. 3 times 1.
Yep.
3, and then 4 minus 3.
All right, and then 4 minus 3. Got it. Yep. So you're ultimately you have to use all 4 of these in order to, because they're basically going away, right? So if you did, for instance, 2 divided by 2, all right, that's going to leave us with a 1, and now we need to use a 1, a 3, and a 4. You can just add all these up. 1 plus 3 plus 4, that gets us our 8.
When are we going home?
I think we get the picture with this one. So I would love to pause for questions. Happy to answer any questions that anyone has across the board.
Do you work with any international schools
We do, absolutely. In
in
Singapore, in Korea, in India.
Latin America?
Yep. Actually, we just renewed a school's Beast Academy account in Bogota, Colombia, just like an hour ago.
Oh, what school? I'm in Bogota.
It's Colegio Nueva.
That's my school. Granada. Cool, good to know.
Yep. You got access now.
Nice.
Do you still have the print books available?
Yeah, we sure do. So I'm gonna stop sharing this so I can make myself bigger. These are our guidebooks. So you already saw a little bit of this. This is what they look like when you're holding them in your hand. This is the graphic novel concept. So the way these books work is students would read through a subset of these pages. You have these natural stop signs. That's the cue for the student to then go into the consumable practice workbook where they're going to answer a number of problems in there. And so that's the idea. You would read some, answer some, read some, answer some. Now, quick note about the books and how they play with the online program. So, of course, as you saw, all of the guidebook content that we have across all 20 guidebooks is in Beast Academy Online. So you already have that. If you have Beast Academy Online, essentially you have all 20 of these, just the digital versions, of course. However, the roughly 20,000 total problems in Beast Academy Online are all unique and distinct from the thousands of problems that you see across the practice book series. And we did that very intentionally for a couple reasons. Number one, we wanted to give even like more practice, greater variety, more of a good thing, so to speak. So if you did like let's say a blended learning approach and you have the practice books plus the online, it means you have twice the number of problems in total to really play with. We also did this because we made the problems different and we suited them specifically to the media themselves. So, in other words, a lot of the problems that you might see in the online program are kind of more tailored to like a digital interactive environment where it's like slide this, move this, that kind of thing. And a lot of the problems that you see in the practice books are, better suited for a tactile turning of the page, filling things out, writing things down experience. But we also know that students have different learning styles and preferences. So when you have books and you have the online, it really increases your probability of connecting with that student depending on the topic that you're working on. And then whatever that student kind of takes to first, let's say they really got the way it was presented in the books, then once you've cleared that hurdle, then you can kind of transition to the online to give them deeper practice once they feel like they already know it, or vice versa, that kind of thing. Any other questions from the group?
Do you have any activities for like older students, like more middle school age students, like 6th through 8th grade?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we actually got our start working starting in middle school and then going all the way through high school. So our organization is called Art of Problem Solving. Beast Academy is really just our elementary math curriculum. So once a student completes Beast Academy level 5, that's the tail end of the Beast sequence, they would, and if they were to stick with us, then they would go into Art of Problem Solving's pre-algebra. And then, we cover all of the subjects that you would typically see in middle school and high school, pre-algebra through calculus. But because we're good math geeks, we do a lot of things that you wouldn't typically find even in like really, really good high schools. So we believe that this is part of a really comprehensive treatment to mathematics education. So in our curriculum, it would go pre-algebra, algebra, and then before going to geometry, you would do some discrete math, so number theory and counting and probability, basically the mathematics of computing, kind of like that underlying foundational logical thinking that would help students become good at, like programming and developing and stuff like that, computer science, if students had an interest in that.
Grayson, when you work with schools, are most of them using it as an enrichment curriculum for advanced learners, or are there certain schools that are moving towards utilizing this as their, standard curriculum? I know it was made for advanced kids originally.
Yes, great question. So I'll give you a couple different answers. And to me, just as some table setting, the answer that I give, I think, is a nod to one of the enduring strengths of our curriculum is that it's eminently flexible. So it can be used, and we have implementation guides for those that would be interested in like a deeper dive. It can be used in, individual self-paced, learner-driven environments. It could be like paired work, small group, whole class, full curriculum replacement, remediation. Like it's like done in all those settings, but I'll talk to you about some more common implementation. So the most common path for Beast Academy, kind of like our foot in the door to most school partnerships, is there's some subset of the overall student population that has needs that aren't met by the core curriculum. Either these students are maybe somewhat bored, or they're fast finishers, or they're just like generally quite interested in math and they really enjoy it and like it. And the educators in front of them know that they might really take to something that looks and feels different and is more challenging. Another benefit that we've found with, like, let's say, GT departments or students all over the country, we work with students in all 50 states and, as we noted earlier, internationally now as well. Beast Academy is really the only curriculum that I'm familiar with, and it's my job to be familiar with this stuff, that can give a advanced, if you want to say gifted, highly capable, whatever the label might be, fourth grader, um, fourth grade math that's going to challenge them as opposed to accelerating them into fifth grade math because there's nothing to see here in fourth grade math anymore. What we do is provide schools and students like the opportunity to say it doesn't matter where your students are, they can all do fourth grade math. But like these students over here are going to do a far deeper dive, like that Block Mountains puzzle that we were talking about, right? Like that's level 3. So for us, that would be like gifted third grade. But as you saw, like especially with that problem with the 80,000 and a 2 and a 5 down there, like that's a good problem for students in middle school a lot of times, so there's a lot going on there. And so what we've started to see as we've kind of like branched out into the world more and more, we get in the door as a gifted enrichment supplement. But then once teachers and educators wrap their mind around what this is and the various benefit that could be had from delivering it to other students, we now see it being used in middle school and even in some like remedial high school settings. So, like, if you take our level 5 material, that we get into a little bit of pre-algebra and some pre-algebraic concepts in there. Like, we're going to get into square roots, we're going to get into exponents, we're going to do all that, but we're going to do like puzzly versions of that. So it's even a little more interesting and perhaps difficult. So if you have like a ninth grader, let's say, that's like struggling with what they should be doing there, we might recommend that a student like that takes a look at like Beast Academy 4 or 5. Now there were some initial concerns revolving around like, hey, is this thing gonna seem like like offensive to a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old because it seems like it's too little kitty. But we haven't actually run into that, to be honest with you. And I think it's because it's so engaging, it's so thoughtful, and the problems are so interesting that what we've actually found in our I would say that our best like example of this is Albuquerque Public Schools. So they had brought this in for like 600 students in like a standard GT capacity. Like, hey, we're going to give on level Beast Academy to kids in that grade level as gifted enrichment. And they would typically use it like in either a push in or pull out capacity, maybe like once or twice a week. But then again, like the educators in the room, they're like seeing how bought in the kids are. They're seeing their like faces light up, seeing how they're talking about math. And they're like, well, we want all our kids to be doing this. So they like the pendulum swing all, to the other side of the room. And they were like, okay, what if we gave sixth graders who are struggling with sixth grade concepts, what if we went back to the place where math missed them? In other words, where they're still relatively confident with the computation of, like, let's say third grade math, but starts to get shaky in like fourth or fifth grade standards. So we're going to give them, those sixth graders, Beast Academy level 3 instead of giving them like illustrative maths remedial option every day. They still had to give the remedial option because, like, they still need to learn, or at least try to learn, some of those sixth grade standards. But they were supplementing that process with Beast Academy 3. And they let that be a year-long experiment. And at the end of that experiment, what they found was astounding. Like, not only did those kids achieve above and beyond what was expected of them relative to historical trends and data, but most importantly to me anyway, like, the educator in me cares a lot more about this than, I know we have to care about scores, but like, to me, this is the most important thing. Those kids started thinking differently. They started talking differently. They started saying things like, I think I like math. I think I want to do more math. I'm excited about solving problems. Like, that's why we're doing what we're doing, like, so that was just really encouraging to see that. And so the I know I'm chatting everyone's ear off here, long-winded answer, but the takeaway here is that Beast Academy can be for everyone as long as you get the mapping right. And like, painting with the broadest of brushes across our 5 levels, I would say that Beast Academy on level, like, take our level 3 stuff, that's good for like a gifted third grader, an average ability fourth grader, or like maybe a struggling fifth grader. It depends on how much they're struggling, but it's painting with a broad brush. We do have pre-assessments to help with all that. But that's like about the right guidance, I would say. And then one final thing is that we do have a few schools who do, because this is a full and complete curriculum. It doesn't need to be used that way. It can be used modularly and topically. Like, if you're only using it twice a week, which is perfectly fine for an enrichment resource, you're definitely not going to cover all the material in a given year. So you can just kind of like pick your spots and pop around depending on where you are in the core curriculum. So let's say you're doing a unit on division, right? You could be like, okay, cool. Now that these students have like good grasp of computational division, now, like, hey, one day this week we're going to do Beast Academy division and like really dive deep in there. But there are schools out there that are like, we love this approach so much, we're just adopting it as our full complete replacement curriculum. Yeah.
Grayson Bean, that is my position in my district. Like, I'm the talented and gifted resource teacher for grades 5 through 12. How do you see like gifted programs? Like, so if they use it as enrichment, like, does that replace what students are doing in the classroom, or is it just supplementing let's say you have a student in, I don't know, 5th grade who basically is showing their proficiency, they are proficient for every unit that they're, but you can't accelerate them. So what do you see, like, advanced learners, how do they use it? Is it like just replacing that classroom work, or are they still asked to do the work in class, but then also the Beast Academy work in addition to that? Or
Yeah, so it's kind of different in different places. Like, a really common model might be, so let's say you're doing like Eureka, right? Like, that's your core curriculum. So maybe for the students for whom you've identified Beast Academy as a good enrichment option for, um, whether it's push in and they're doing it quietly in the back of the classroom while the rest of the kids get like the core lesson, or whether it's pull out and like those kids are getting enrichment in a different classroom, but like once or twice a week. So it's like, let's say it's Tuesdays and Thursdays, those kids are doing Beast Academy, but on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they're like chugging along with their like standard Eureka lessons and stuff like that. But because they've already demonstrated advanced proficiency in Eureka, if they were to be in Eureka classroom Monday through Friday, they would feel bored. They would feel like they know all this stuff. So it's like, okay, we're going to like hit the pause button. You don't need to be in here right now. Why don't we take you out? You're going to be doing this kind of stuff for 45 minutes over here and then you can go to your next block or whatever it is. And then the program is, I don't know if everyone can see this. So like it's structured topically. So you can see that each one of the guide and practice book pairings focuses on 3 topics. So it works really well for enrichment in like if you are using it for enrichment, the wrong thing to do, I would say, if you're like giving it to a 5th grader, I shouldn't say wrong. It's probably the inefficient thing to do would be like start at the beginning of level 5 and have them work their way all the way through the content. You could do that, but it's not going to necessarily map content wise in terms of flow with what Eureka's doing. So instead, you would just take it's like, where are you in Eureka? And then be like, oh, I'm going to find that in Beast. And then on Wednesdays, when my kids are doing their Beast stuff, it's like, oh, okay, they need to go into lesson 5 because that's where we started with Eureka. Boom, we're going to dive deeper into that. And then you go back to lesson 2. And then, so it's very easy to like kind of pop around in here and cover the ground that you need to based on what you're doing kind of like in your core sequence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
I think we have time for maybe one more question if anybody else has anything for Grayson.
Will you be sharing the cost of this? I mean, I'll just ask.
Yeah, for sure. So I can give you the range right now. Like don't go on the website to look at cost because that's not what schools pay. So like parents can get individual subscriptions to Beast Academy Online. Beast Academy Online, when a school brings it on, basically you just tell us how many seats you need, and then we'll set you up with an institutional account that has that number of seats. Every seat gives access to the entire curriculum, all of the content that we've created from levels 1 through 5 inclusive, and then you just decide where students go. The simplest example ever would be you're like, all right, we need 60 seats because we have 20 gifted 2nd graders, 20 gifted 3rd graders, 20 gifted 4th graders. You'd put 20 in level 2, 20 in level 3, 20 in level 4. You can buy a personal subscription for like at home use. That's $100 per year. We don't dream of charging that to schools. So we have a volume-based pricing system, and it's basically determined by the number of students you enroll. And that range could be anywhere from like $18 to $66 per student per year. So depending on how many kids you enroll in it, it could be as low as 18 per student per year. It could be 66. It's likely somewhere in between that.
And that's mainly for like kids in 1st through 5th, however, right? Like, so if it were to go, like, if you want to do something like that for middle schoolers, the art of problem solving would be something different.
Yes, with but there's the bubble kids, as I would call them, that are like the 6th graders. So it kind of depends. Like sometimes 6th graders truly are best served by like Beast Academy level 5. Sometimes it would be pre-algebra, but we can help with that to like, determine like, hey, they should either go this route or they should go this route. Cost wise for the art of problem solving materials is like roughly this. We're talking about roughly the same kind of ranges per student per year. Yep. And I will don't know if I already did this, but I'll just put my email in the chat here. So if anyone wants to have some questions, post webinar, feel free to write me.
That is great. Thank you so much to Grayson for sharing all of your insights and all of the strategies with us. And thanks to everybody else for joining. So many great questions and some awesome participation. So that was wonderful. Just as a reminder, we did record today's session. So we'll be sharing that with any resources and things. We can also share out, Grayson, your email as well after this. So if if you're watching it or you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out since that was so nice of you to share that. We hope that all of you have some new thoughts or ideas to share with your students. And on behalf of WayTag, we really appreciate all of your time today. And we hope to see you at a future webinar. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.